it was a difficult end, Birch, to Ireland's Six Nations season. The women went down to Scotland in the end after an hour of like a solid enough performance in which there were certainly opportunities for them to do a little bit better. Scotland showed the difference between them in the end in just pulling away and finishing over the top of them. Ireland suffered their first wooden spoon since 2004, and we're at risk of having maybe a similar conversation to the one we've had most weeks in the aftermath of these defeats, because infrastructurally, you reap what you sow, and it turns out a decade ago they were sowing feck all, really. So like, yeah. Here we are. I guess I should just ask you about the game to begin with. Like, was there anything in the performance that was maybe more positive than we'd seen in the previous weeks? What was your assessment of it? Maybe forgetting about the scoreline for a moment.
Yeah, no, there wasn't a huge improvement, to be honest, because I think against England we were positive about their ability to kind of frustrate England for that third quarter in particular. But the reality is Scotland are a way a much more inferior side to England or France. Now, having said that, I actually was impressed by some of Scotland's attacking play, and they showed a good skill set. They had some good pace, but Ireland, it was just a horrible campaign for Ireland, and obviously only scored 2 tries, one of them being a penalty try, and so little points on the board. Our attack really didn't make any massive step forward. I don't think so. No, there wasn't a huge amount of positives for it, to be honest, to take, and it's in some ways it's nearly good it's over, because and I feel sorry for the players, because I think it must be hard not getting anything back in terms of results or real tangible elements of the performance on a weekly basis, and then obviously all the outside focus on it. So obviously Greg McWilliams will no longer be there, you would imagine. Obviously no official statement, but it looks like he's parted ways. And then you wonder, is next year going to be year one of a new start? You know what I mean? Because in fairness to Greg, he set a stall out to blood a lot of new players who he hoped obviously would grow in the jersey and develop and become used to that exposure, etc., and become better technically, tactically through time in camp and playing against them. But obviously now the new coach is probably going to come in and pick a different profile of players or a different mix. So yeah, I think there's a meeting next Wednesday where the RFU come out and explain exactly what the plan is for women's rugby. But look, there's no doubt it's been broken a long time and it hasn't shown any real credible signs of getting better. The other side of it, like I think the RFU are going to say they're spending 5.5 million on the women's game per year now, which is a significant investment. So the key is the investment is there. It's just a case of trying to make sure the plan is aligned to that to make sure that we start to close that gap, because the gap is big. The other side of it is who wants to coach this team now. You know what I mean? It's not exactly an attractive position. Rumor is John Mitchell is going into England, and obviously we saw whatever. Nearly 60,000 people in Twickenham this weekend. England, incredible side. Who will take this job? The only thing I would say is that obviously being in WX3, you would imagine they will win that competition. So you're going to get some wins, and obviously a win could be massive for that group, because I think they were low on confidence from the defeats. And a couple of wins in a row, and then next year Six Nations they play Wales, Italy, and Scotland at home. So the draw is more favourable as well. So we may actually just naturally, by nature of the fixtures, be about to see improvement in wins and improvement in performances. But there's a lot of work to do, and yeah, I'm fascinated to see what the plan is next Wednesday if that meeting goes ahead.
Would it make most sense, Murray, to give it Briggsy till the end of the season if Niamh Briggs was interested in taking the role, purely for the sake of the continuity that Birch mentions we could wind up missing if somebody comes in from the outside and kind of tears up the script again and does the wrong thing?
It makes sense. Will be quite an obvious step as well, and Niamh Briggs has shown real promise in her coaching career so far. It would still be probably a big jump up early enough in that coaching career, but if continuity is what you want, then absolutely. The only argument against that is that what are you continuing? Only kind of negative momentum and poor performances. But this I'm surprised at the shock and the surprise around Ireland's performances, to be honest with you. We spoke about it right before the Six Nations. All the games that were potentially winnable this time were away from home. And Ireland weren't in the last World Cup. They're chasing from a long, long way back. And it's the worst possible time that they could be having this low ebb, because everyone else, the entire sport really, is making incredible strides of progress. But it was always going to take several years. And I suppose the worry now is that the 2025 World Cup is kind of looming, and qualification around that is tied to WXV 2024. And if you are going to completely rip things up over the next year and restart again, well, then you're starting from scratch again with real pressure on you to start performing there. So it's a complete mess, and this is a mess that Irish Rugby has and the RFU have brought on themselves by those 10, 15, whatever it was, years of not putting enough intelligent investment into this. And maybe it wasn't always just about resource, it was at times about the intent and the will, and that wasn't there. We've discussed recently that the signs are positive, that, you know, Kevin Potts has made an impact in coming in as CEO, and there's been, I think, a satisfaction with the desire he has to improve things, and others in the RFU, and they've put people into new positions that weren't there. As Birch says, the investment financially is big, but it's just such a difficult spot because you're so far behind now. Ireland they're one of the poorest teams in the international game at the moment, and they've dropped to 10th now in the world rankings. The good thing is there's going to be 16 teams at the next World Cup, but it's just a very, very difficult position. So whoever takes over has a massive job on their hands, and any other coach is going to look at Greg McWilliams' example and think, that's damaged his career. And I hope it's not ultra damaging in that regard, because he was on a really promising trajectory and got good roles in the States and came back, and there were other nations interested in him, I think, at the time, and he took the Ireland job, and hopefully he'll be able to bounce back in his career. A young Irish coach who didn't have a big kind of playing background. I think it's always good to see people like that getting opportunities, but it's not an attractive job at the moment. However, right now, the only possible way is up. They've kind of hit this low point of finishing last in the Six Nations again, and unfortunately showing very little. It's clear that there's also the issue of balancing the talent pool with 7s and 15s that needs to be re-evaluated probably post Paris Olympics, and see where the talent levels are at. But it's just a complete mess at the moment.
Putting your coaching hat on, Owen, and considering the scrutiny and even some of the personal abuse that would have been written about Greg McWilliams on Twitter and the like, is there anything about the job that would appeal to a coach at the moment? Is the fact that this might be the nadir and the only way is up enough of a USP for somebody to go in there?
Yeah, for me, I think there's a clear understanding around what's happening beneath the senior national team, because ultimately that's what's delivering the players to the national team, which the national team head coach doesn't have too much influence over it. So I think when we're talking about that investment, talent identification, coach development, all those sort of structures need to be put in place to ultimately deliver a successful national team. And I think the national team coach ultimately can't really influence that. I think that needs to come from above, whether it's a high performance manager, director of rugby that's looking directly at the women's game in isolation. And there needs to be a real definitive 6 to 10 year plan in terms of what that looks like. And then national team head coach obviously has to work with the talent that's available to him and try and build an identity and a game model that is aligned from pathways rugby all the way up to senior national level. But it's a big remit, and I think whoever is given the head coach role needs to be given time. But I guess conversely, the head coach needs to understand that what's being delivered to him is there's a pathway to success there, which hasn't necessarily always been the case.
And that's the big thing that has to come from next Wednesday, is that real clarity and a bounce of optimism based on here's the plan for everything underneath the national team, because that's been the big issue. And there's always, like, the contracts thing has kind of almost been a distraction to what the real issue is. Like, a lot of the Irish players who stayed in England, there's misconceptions. They're earning far less than the 15 to 30K that was on offer in Ireland. Like, they're not getting well paid over there, but they feel they're in a really good league with a really good system. They're going to continue improving as players because the setup there is excellent. And then they look home and they think, still they think, what's happening? You know, what is the plan here? The IAL, the Celtic Cup, the interprovincials. What's the kind of, as you say, what's the pathway, and what's the area that's going to get the investment and make us better players and give us a chance to improve? And that needs to be really, really clear here now. And that's the thing. You can give investment, you can give money, but it has to be channeled in the right way with the right people driving it to make sure that everyone who should be part of the pathway is really buying in.